Okay, and we're live. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our event tonight. My name is Claire. I'm the event coordinator for Village Books in Bellingham and Linden, Washington, and we are so happy that you could join us this evening. A couple of things about Crowdcast, just in case you've never been on this before. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, there's a little follow button. If you click on follow, you can see what Village Books has. You can see a lot of our past events, and you can see events that we have scheduled coming up in the future. Also, let's see, the chat works much like Zoom. If you're familiar with Zoom, as pretty much we're all familiar with Zoom at this point, I think. So on the right-hand side of your screen, we are going to keep the chat enabled. And we do invite audience engagement throughout this event this evening. So if you have questions or comments, we probably will hang on to the questions until we get to the Q&A portion, but I will be keeping track of the questions as they come in. So you can either pop them into the chat, or you can use that ask a question feature that you see on the bottom of your screen. You just click on that, a little dialog box opens up, and you can type in your question right there. To those of you who made a contribution when you registered for our event to support the Village Books event programming, we really appreciate it. To say that this is a challenging time, we all know, to say the least, it's a very challenging time. So we are very fortunate to still be able to provide free programming, but we do appreciate those of you who could kick in a couple dollars to support that. And if you didn't, that's fine. Like I say, we're glad we can still do this and offer it as a free service. So we have a lot of great events coming up, and I want to let you know about one that's actually tomorrow night. It's tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, that's Pacific Standard Time. We are going to be welcoming Lauren Geertsen, and she's going to be in conversation with Heather Duranja. They're going to talk about Lauren's new book, The Invisible Corset, Break Free from Beauty Culture and Embrace Your Radiant Self. This is going to be an interesting one. So that's at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. That's Friday, March 12th. And I want to state that the Virtual Readings Gallery is a safe space. Any user exhibiting offensive, hateful, or inappropriate behavior will be dismissed from the event immediately. And this green button right here where it says purchase books here, if you click on that green button, it takes you straight to the Village Books website where you can purchase copies of all of our authors' books this evening. Well, you can pre-order one of them. One of them is not quite out yet. We're excited. 19 more days, I think. But you can, of course, pre-order that book from us as well. So if you're feeling inspired tonight and want to support these authors and support an independent bookstore, I encourage you to click through to that green link and purchase the books by this evening's featured guests. And speaking of our guests, first we are going to be hearing from Meg Weber. Meg Weber writes memoir about sex, grief, family, and tangled relationships. Her writing gives voice to the ways her life unfolds outside the boundaries prescribed for her. She is a queer mental health therapist in her hometown of Portland, Oregon, where she lives with her teenager and their Labradoodle named Portland. Meg's writing is featured in MUTHA Magazine, Manifestation, Rabble Lit, and HipMama, and in anthologies by Seal Press, Sincyr Publishing, and Pact Press. I'm trying to shuffle and get the right book here in my hands because I want to show it to you because it's got such a cool cover. She's here to introduce her new book, A Year of Mr. Lucky. So please join me in thunderous applause in welcoming Meg Weber.
Thank you so much, Claire. I'm really excited to be here with Diana and Jen, and thank you for hosting us. And I just wanted to say a little bit about how this reading came to be with all three of us, and then I'll go ahead and read from A Year of Mr. Lucky. So I met both Jen and Diana on one of the Facebook groups for forthcoming authors that have books coming out sometime during 2021. And Diana had commissioned an excerpt from Jen's memoir, The Other Mothers, for the website Healthy Women. And I read the excerpt and it was beautiful. And so I commented on that. And then I was teaching a class on working with LGBTQ clients because I'm a mental health therapist. And so I approached Jen to come and speak in my class, and that was great. We had a really good time, and they really appreciated her sharing some of her story. And so we decided, since our books launched at about the same time, we would do an event together. And then we wanted a third, and Diana was a perfect fit with her book coming out later this month. So, and now here we all are with you. So thank you all for being here. And I'll set this up a little bit. So Mr. Lucky is the name of a man that I was involved with shortly after my divorce. And I'm going to read a piece which is from when he and I met in person for the first time, but we had been emailing back and forth for about 3 weeks, getting to know each other, flirting, negotiating, and this is the first time that we met in person. So, I'm driving across town to meet Sir for the first time. Sarah Bareilles is singing Brave on repeat, and I will myself to heed her lyrics and let my words not be empty. I arrive in his neighborhood too early. His street comes into view, but I drive past and turn a corner to circle the block, hoping that my memory of a gas station nearby is accurate, since the orange fuel light is staring me down from the dashboard. Anxiety swirls in my belly as I pull into the gas station. How will we fit with each other? Our words weave tantalizing stories back and forth. Will our bodies know how to do the same? Will our verbal play transfer from writing to speaking? Will our desire manifest in real life the way it does on the screen? The radio interrupts the music streaming from my phone when I turn off the engine. Tom Petty's Into the Great Wide Open starts to play, and I grin. We discussed this album in our first email exchange. This feels like a good omen. With the tank full, I drive back to his street, willing myself to chill the fuck out. I'm still a couple of minutes early. Across from his house, I park the car and silence the music. The only sounds are my quick, nervous breaths. I gather my purse and the offering of fresh raspberries I've brought for him. A surprising calm settles in my center as I walk toward his front door. I feel sexy and strong, ready. I knock and he answers right away. My breath freezes in my throat as I realize he's even more handsome than I imagined. His pictures on his dating profile did not do him justice. He's in jeans and a t-shirt with a warm smile in his brown eyes. Notice isn't a strong enough word for how this attraction lands in my body. As he pushes open the screen door to let me in, I step back and nearly fall off the front porch. So much for my graceful entrance. I cross the threshold into his outstretched arms, hugging me hello. It's nice to finally lay eyes on you, I say, desperate to regain my composure. I brought you these, I add, handing over the berries. He thanks me and begins to show me around his house. The space is warm and inviting. His style complements my own, which is not going to help me keep any of this in perspective. I remind myself this is a casual play relationship, no strings attached. He leads me through the kitchen to a room that is part art studio, part living room. One wall is lined with paintings, bold, colorful, modern art canvases. Most of the other walls hold shelves and shelves of books. There are plants and framed photographs. He's literate, artistic, sexy. The word game beckons from a low table in the living room studio. I set my purse down and grab the soda I brought with me. He's already poured himself a glass of red wine. I perch anxiously on a chair near the table. The chair is too deep for me. If I sit back, my feet won't reach the floor, and I need all the grounding force I can manage right now. He notices my discomfort, goes to the kitchen for a smaller wooden chair. You'll be more comfortable in this. I thank him and we begin the game. Small talk winds its way and figure eights between us. We are strangers in person, but have exchanged so many words via email that intimacy already hums, connecting us. He rattles off something about house rules for the game, and I laugh, more to myself than at him. Of course, this top has his own rules for the game. We take our turns mingling conversation with the quiet, determined focus of finding the next right word to place on the board. Is Meg short for Margaret? He asks. No, Megan. I resist telling a longer story about my name, decide instead to ask where he grew up and whether he has siblings. He confirms his Midwest roots. I knew he wouldn't sound like he was from here. He has a sister. I explain about my large family and being a Portland native. He keeps score, his own tally quickly climbing thanks to strategic plays on double word scores, while mine grows at a much slower pace. He attempts modesty, which I find endearing. I'm just getting all the good letters. It isn't true. He's trouncing me, like we both knew he would. I'm nervous enough to just be grateful I can spell. We both smile at words with any hint of suggestion. Rope, suck, command. We're enjoying each other. I'm less shy than we both feared and can hold my own in the banter. I catch him off guard, asking about the one overlapping connection I discovered in my brief Google search once he shared his last name. It turns out he's in a band with a friend of one of my friends, one small degree of separation that is daunting to him. I see it flash across his face as surprise and mild concern. We pick up threads of discussions we've had online, ask additional questions. With no limit here in person, I revert to my over-inquisitive nature. I pause the game to step outside and call my friend Emily, following through with my now obviously unnecessary safety plan. He will not hurt me. I am not in any danger. I quickly gush that things are going well and promise to call her when I leave. We finish the game, my score dismal compared to his. I excuse myself to the bathroom, sneak a look at my phone to reread our scene opening ritual. It feels likely I'll get to use those words. When I return, he catches my eye and asks, "Are you game?" My shy, giddy smile says, "Fuck yeah, I'm game," but I answer, "Yes." I move toward the kitchen chair, make eye contact again, and ask, "Should I return this to the kitchen?" With this question, the dynamic shifts. Yes, do. The set of his gaze and tone of his voice suddenly have an edge of command they weren't infused with before. This change reverberates in my own pulse. I replace the chair and remind myself on the short walk back that I'm allowed to want this. I am choosing to offer myself to him. I enter the room as he finishes shutting the open windows and lowers the shades. He faces me with a look of challenge and invitation in his eyes and takes a seat on the couch. "I'll let you start us off then." I settle myself on my knees before him and take a slow breath, one more dose of grounding before we take off. Invoking our scene opening ritual, my eyes locked with his, a spark of desire ignites in me. I think I see it catch fire in him too as my words land. "While I am here, I am yours to use in any way you choose, sir." A lot more exciting things happened that night, but I'll just leave that there. And then there's one other short piece that I wanted to read that I thought was really appropriate for this time of being in quarantine. And many of us are not able to get to see people that we are missing, and a lot of us are feeling hungry for touch and connection. So this short piece is called "The Myth of Fingerprints." Especially after the first time we met, I could feel Mr. Lucky's touch on me throughout the next day. My breath halted as I remembered the smooth command of his hands on my body. With a contented smile on my face, I took a deep breath to savor the memory and incorporate it into my being. In my 14-year marriage, I went weeks, months, entire years without sexual contact between us. The reasons for this are complicated. We were physically and sexually aloof. Neither of us actively cultivated that distance, But that was the reality for most of our time together. Within the last year, my sexual desire has experienced a revival, and it's been fun to explore and connect with male lovers. But in the last 7 weeks, I've had absolutely zero intimate contact with anyone but myself. I'm touch hungry. I crave both the release of sexual play with a partner and the intimacy of cuddling, kissing, caressing that isn't inherently sexual. And I've had none of it since the last time I played with Mr. Lucky. From within this longing for contact, my sense memory of lovers' hands on my body falters. The symbolic fingerprints and the response their touch elicits begin to slip away. I want it back. I want more, and soon. Thank you so much. And next we're going to hear from Jennifer Berney.
Wow. Thank you, Meg. That was I have questions. Okay, so our next reader, Jennifer Berney, writes to explore the human state of longing. Her essays have appeared in Long Reads, The Offing, Brevity, The New York Times, The Washington Post, and many other publications. She lives in Olympia, Washington with her wife, 2 children, and many animals. And she's here tonight to read from The Other Mothers, 2 women's journey to find the family that was always there. So, without further ado, join me in welcoming Jennifer Berney.
Thank you, Claire. I just want to thank Meg for inviting me to be part of this reading tonight, and I want to thank Village Books. And I just want to do a little shout out for the independent bookstores right now, who I just think are getting so many of us through this pandemic. I know, yeah, we've been taking full advantage of our indie bookstores lately, and it's been a glorious thing. So I was trying to decide what to read tonight, and I knew that my co-readers were doing readings that dealt with desire and sexuality. And strangely enough, my book is about trying to make a baby, and there's very little sex or desire in it. So I was trying to figure out what I would read. And I decided that I've actually been longing to read from my chapter on delivery. So that's what I'm going to read from tonight, just a little snippet from that chapter. So the chapter is called Delivery. I was exactly 1 week past my due date when I flopped onto bed next to Kelly and moaned, "I'm so done." Earlier that day, an acquaintance had told me, "You'll know when you're about to go into labor because all of a sudden you'll have lots of energy." Well, then it's not going to be today, I told her, because I feel like shit. As I hoisted myself into bed now, the weight of my belly felt impossible. It was like trying to move through the world with an anvil tied to my waist. I was so tired I was angry. All of my sensory nerves were firing at once. I turned on my side, exhaled, and let myself fall into sleep. Just after midnight, something woke me. An ache. It was an ache I recognized from nearly 20 years of menstruating, the ache of my uterus contracting like a towel being wrung out. Outside in the dark, an owl hooted. My ache subsided. Stillness. The owl hooted again. Kelly slept. I wouldn't wake her, I decided, not yet. Instead, I tuned into my baby's motion. I let his kicks and swipes reassure me. He was still in there, alive, moving the same way he did yesterday and the days before that. I wondered what it felt like to be the thing inside of that contraction. Did it feel like a squeeze, a push? Could he sense that the life he'd known up until now, the life of darkness and saline, of muffled sounds, of practiced underwater breaths, was about to end? that he would be pushed into a world of light and air, transformed forever. Another contraction, 12:22. I tracked time on Kelly's alarm clock, the digits glowing red. The pain was remarkably bearable. Within the pain, I could feel the promise of the pain subsiding. It felt reliable and even. Cool air came through the cracked window. One more at 12:32. The ache returned, a small but grinding force, and with it, a trickle down my leg. I stood up, more fluid, more than I could contain. "You okay?" Kelly asked me, her voice muffled by her pillow. She asked me this every night when I got up to pee, her sleep brain poised for my labor. Every night I laughed and told her I was fine. "I think my water broke," I said this time. "Are you sure?" she asked. I walked to the bathroom, my gate wide so I could avoid the soaked through crotch of my boxer shorts. I turned on the light. On the floor, I could see a trail of water. I sat on the toilet to pee. In the toilet bowl, I left behind an array of excretions, urine and a fresh streak of blood, but also tiny bits of old blood that looked like ground chalk. I had never read about this, about the blood and the matter one's body released in early labor. I worried, but the baby was now poking me with all his limbs at once. I could feel heels and elbows and knees. He was undeniably alive. Kelly appeared in the doorway. She assessed the water on the floor. "Your water really did break. You didn't believe me?" "I didn't know." She grabbed a handful of rags from the shelf and began to clean. On my way back to the bedroom, I turned the kitchen light on. There, on the linoleum floor, in a small puddle of water, lay what must have been my mucus plug. As I stood there inspecting it, grossed out and amazed, Kelly joined me. "Wow," she said. She examined her rag. "Don't," I said. "I'll get it." I grabbed a handful of toilet paper and winced as I scooped it up. Another contraction came, and I grimaced. "How will we know when it's time to go?" Kelly asked me. I washed my hands and called the midwife, who told me to go back to bed. She didn't need to see me until my contractions came at 5-minute intervals. "Rest while you can," she told me. It was just after 1 a.m. I slept between contractions. The rhythm of it was easy. I spooned next to Kelly and dozed. When the tension in my body woke me, I squeezed her hand. She announced the time. 1:10, 1:20, 1:30. My body was strangely precise. The owl hooted. Cool air came through the crack in the window. Outside, there was nothing but darkness. We were moving through that darkness, sleeping and waking, contracting and relaxing, like swimming laps in a pool. When the clock read 6, when there was a small edge of light in the sky, Kelly rose from the bed. "I'm making coffee," she announced. Without her, the room felt charged and empty. I heard the whir of the coffee grinder. My uterus folded. Out of nowhere, a new kind of contraction, deeper and longer. I gripped the bed rail. I moaned. It was 6:07. In the car, on the way to the hospital, my baby continued to nudge me from the inside. I tried to allow myself to feel joy. I told myself I would meet my baby today, but I doubted. It seemed so abstract, so unreal. This thing that had been squirming and kicking inside of me, would it really see light? Would it really come out of me alive and whole? In the prenatal yoga class I had attended, the instructor asked us to introduce ourselves and check in at the beginning of each class. Every time a woman announced that she was planning a home birth, she got a round of cheers from the instructor and the other students. In private, the instructor recounted to me what she hated about hospital births. She had never birthed in a hospital nor attended a hospital birth, so she couldn't tell me anything specific about our local hospital where I planned to deliver. But she was convinced they were all the same. They would pressure me into a C-section if my progress was slow, she warned me. They would insist I get an epidural, even if I didn't want one. I had my own concerns about the hospital. Every woman in my yoga class had been straight and married. At our birthing class, Kelly and I were conspicuously the only queer couple. In fact, I had walked into the first session alone while Kelly parked the car, and the instructor asked if I had a birthing partner joining me. She's parking the car, I said, happy for the chance to prepare the room for our difference. Oh, the instructor had said, is it your mother? I was worried about how the hospital would receive us. I didn't want to be pushed into a C-section or an epidural, that was true. But I worried also about how things would go if the attending nurse, for instance, wasn't fond of us, or if any of the staff, consciously or not, treated Kelly as if she didn't quite belong there. But it had taken me years to conceive this child, and there was never a moment of my pregnancy where I took the desired outcome, a live, healthy baby, for granted. I chose a hospital birth to keep my bases covered and selected a midwife rather than an obstetrician in hopes that I could keep invasive interventions to a minimum, and I prayed that the social dynamics wouldn't be a shit show. The maternity ward was in the basement of the hospital. Bright fluorescent lights bounced off linoleum floors. The hospital had speakers wired to broadcast the melody of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star each time a child was born. The tune was playing as Kelly guided me inside, one hand on my back. It's a busy morning here, the receptionist told us as she walked us to our room. Barometric pressure rose, lots of babies coming. I pictured newborns falling from the sky like rain. I'm gonna stop there. And I'm so excited to hear Diana read from her new book.
I love that image. Did you just hear an echo for a second? Are we good? Okay. I thought I heard the echo just for a second. The baby is falling from the sky. The barometric pressure changing. That's everybody's going to go into labor now. That's funny. Okay. Thank you so much, Jen. So next we get to hear from Diana Whitney. I wish I could hold up her book, which is coming soon. It's coming very, very soon, and it's got a beautiful cover. Diana Whitney writes across the genres with a focus on feminism, motherhood, and sexuality. Her first book, Wanting It, became an indie bestseller and won the Rubery Book Award in poetry. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Glamour, Long Reads, and many more. An activist in her Vermont hometown and beyond, Diana advocates for survivors of sexual violence and works as an editor and a yoga teacher. So she's here to give us a preview of You Don't Have to Be Everything, Poems for Girls Becoming Themselves. So please welcome Diana Whitney.
Thank you so much, Claire. And wow, what an awesome group. Meg, thank you for catalyzing this. And I'm just happy to be here from Vermont with everyone on the West Coast. I'm in Southern Vermont on Abenaki land. So thanks to everyone for coming. If you want to put in the chat where you're from, I'd love to see it. I'm gonna hold up, I actually have a copy of my book. I know it's like weirdly reversed, but it's You Don't Have to Be Everything, Poems for Girls Becoming Themselves. It's a inclusive poetry anthology for teen girls, but really it's for anyone, and very accessible poems. Really, my mission was to encourage girls to embrace the fullness of who they are and who they're becoming. And the origin of the project, I'm going to read probably 4 poems from the book. That's probably good enough for an online reading for our attention span. But I thought I'd tell you the origin of the project and just speak informally. I think everyone has a time in their lives from their past that feels profound and unresolved, a time that's tender, like a bruise when you touch it. And for me, it's always been adolescence. It was hard for me being a teen girl. Beneath the honors class exterior, I really struggled with depression and self-loathing, body image, self-harming. And I also carried deep shame about my sexuality. I didn't admit to anyone, even myself, that I was really bisexual, that for all of 7th grade, I'd been in a secret relationship with my best friend. My parents eventually found out and forbade me to see her, which, so I carried that secret with me for the rest of high school. I didn't come out until I was 20 during the very exhilarating summer of 1993. Thank you, Ani DeFranco and Sarah McLachlan. But high school were years of silence, shame, and confusion. So when the opportunity came to me to create a poetry anthology, especially for teen girls, I knew I wanted to collect the poems I wish that I'd read when I was a teen. I wanted candid poems that spoke honestly about desire and rage and depression and loneliness, about shame, which I think is a really big thing for girls in our culture, and also about belonging and strength and attitude, about queer love especially, and about self-love. So I did actually collect, not necessarily deliberately, but a lot of queer poets. So I thought I would read tonight from the chapter. This book is actually divided in chapters according to emotion. It's also illustrated. So maybe I'll just hold up a couple of the illustrations because they're super powerful. There are 3 illustrators in the book. So this is Attitude, really awesome. And then Rage is another. And I'm going to read to you from the Longing chapter. And so I did do what's considered maybe in some circles an editorial faux pas. I anthologized one of my own poems, and it's the title poem of my first book, Wanting It. But I included it because really it's right on topic. It's about high school. And it's one of the only poems I wrote about high school. Wanting It. Wasn't I beautiful? Wasn't I desperate? Didn't I give a shit about world peace, inner peace? Only wanting it, secret graffiti, spelled out in lip gloss on the locker room wall. The new underwire bit into my ribs, pushed me up, and I caught the mirror, wanted it, cocked a hip, wanted it, front seat, back seat, down on the floor, brag of bruises blooming like plums on my neck, tender, bad, and legitimate. I wanted to ditch it, wanted to drive, alone in the car for the first time, silence, such concentration my hands tongued the wheel. I could see the brushstroke of each yellow line, could feel my tires crush pieces of gravel, and my 10 toes alive inside my shoes, firm and quick on the pedals. There was an orange lodged underneath the clutch. Squeeze it and shift. Squeeze it and there. Those boys who juiced the halls with slouch and threw their bodies around the field, they watched when I punched it to second, third, burned my tracks along the high school tar. They looked at me as if I could kill them. They wanted to kill me back against a locker. I could feel my body jammed up on metal, my skin in ridges where the grates dug in, my skirt hiked up, my muscles like fish, my third eye watching from the outside in. I was some other girl. I was anyone's candy. So what's interesting about this poem, reading it now from my wise middle-aged vantage point, I wrote it in my 20s about high school. And now I read it and I see an experience of dissociation, my third eye watching from the outside in. And now, really coming to terms with being a survivor of sexual violence, I think that's pretty natural response. Also, the poem, it kind of demonstrates like a performative heterosexuality, which is what I think I was doing in high school. I kind of became obsessively boy crazy to sort of squelch the truth of my queerness. So I included that poem, and what I want to read now is this wonderful queer poem by a poet, Rachel Wiley, and I encourage you, after this, I'll put her information in the chat to look her up. She's amazing. She says that she's more body than positivity. She's very funny, very clever poet, spoken word. You can actually watch her read this poem. It's called But They Say I Will Not Make It. Rachel's a queer poet. When you are fat and I am fat, the streets are full of soothsayers telling you how you will die. They all seem so anxious for my heart, like it's an unattended package at the airport. So I move through the world listening for my heart, like it must be a clock swallowed by a crocodile. No, a canary that goes silent much too late. No, they are certain it is going to attack my heart, like a hungry bear on a campground, ripping a zipper down my chest, cracking my sternum like a cheap tent pole. No, I am not at all sorry for my size. So I must be a barge which would make my heart a fish washed onto the deck, gasping, flopping, slamming scales off its body, like an angry beauty queen ripping sequins from a dress that didn't sparkle enough to win. But then that would make my heart a beauty queen that can't walk in heels. No, wait. My heart is an hourglass filled with gunpowder, and at any given moment, some wild spark is gonna blow me sky high. So I don't know. Maybe this is why I love the way I do, with teeth and swallow and song and snarl and water and sparkle and consequence. Maybe this is why I show up to your front door, out of breath and full of dazzle, like this is the last ballyhoo and nothing at all can wait till morning. Forgive me. They keep telling me that my heart is not my heart. They keep telling me that I am dying. This may be our last chance. Rachel Wiley, But They Say I Will Not Make It. Just love that completely unapologetic desire. I'm going to read a short poem. This is actually from the Rage chapter, and I will admit that the placing of these poems just a little bit arbitrary. Some of them could go in different chapters. But so this is kind of like a rage/desire combo poem. It's called And If by Invisibility by Tamiko Bayer. And if by invisibility, they mean they do not see us. Our bows and gnashing teeth, our prom dress, feather boa heels, hair glittered gray, the fisting and holler, fishnets, breasts, breasts, breasts. Our voices pitched forward into reclamation, the blood in our mouths, sweet, slick, like our ready to take you between our legs. We signify no shelter, signify the precipice from where we've returned. All our baskets full of fruit and shark teeth. In the end, no vision, villains split. Our DIY manicures all silvery and chipped. Our shouts so lovely, all that licking. Tamiko Bayer. So when I was imagining my teen self encountering these poems, it was really exciting. The last one I'm going to read is a short poem by Cameron Awkward Rich. It's also in the Longing chapter, but it's not really longing for a beloved or for a crush or even for a friend. It's more like longing for justice, for a different world, a better world, maybe for some profound connection. It really, to me, really speaks for the time that we're in right now. Meditations in an emergency. I wake up and it breaks my heart. I draw the blinds and the thrill of rain breaks my heart. I go outside, I ride the train, walk among the buildings, men in Monday suits. The flight of doves, the city of tents beneath the underpass, the huddled mass, old women hawking roses, and children, all of them break my heart. There's a dream I have in which I love the world. I run from end to end like fingers through her hair. There are no borders, only wind. Like you, I was born. Like you, I was raised in the institution of dreaming. Hand on my heart, hand on my stupid heart. That's Cameron Awkward Rich, Meditations in an Emergency. So thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Wow. Thank you all for sharing your pieces. So this is the time at which we invite folks in the audience to ask any questions that you might have, or any comments that you want to make, any observations. Right off the bat, I would kind of like to ask, why is it a faux pas to include one of your own poems in an anthology? I did not know about this faux pas.
That's a little bit of a joke. I will say maybe in academia that it might be considered. Like, I did speak with an older poet friend, I'm not going to name any names, who did tell me that it wasn't appropriate. And then I decided I was going to go ahead and do it anyways, because I'm not in that academic world. And also it didn't feel gratuitous. Like it did feel on topic. But I think, Claire, if you kind of maybe dug into, I also been seeing some models of other poets who I love, like my friends who are doing anthologies doing it. And so that gave me the confidence. And I actually think, like, for girls and women, like, it's okay to say that our voices matter and that we can do that. So that was another part.
Okay.
Well, I guess, I mean, if we're waiting for, I encourage anyone in the audience to ask any questions, but I just was like, Meg, I was struck by the vulnerability in your writing and just wanted to ask, like, what it's been like to write openly about sex and sexuality and risk and like how it feels now to read it and share it with us.
It's really vulnerable, like you said. I've had really positive feedback. I think the things I was most worried about were what were my siblings going to think? What was it like to put this book out and have it be this graphically sexual and involve, BDSM and kink and my siblings have been supportive. I don't think any of them are going to read it, which I think is fine with me. That's probably better for everybody. But it is, a lot of my friends that didn't know me during the time that this was happening are reading the book, and it does feel edgy and a little bit extra vulnerable, but it's also really neat to be able to share these experiences in my life with people that maybe I wouldn't have told the stories to, but now they can pick it up and read it on their own. So
great.
I appreciated how, you really set a scene very, very well. Just even, and I could relate to just that anticipation of, approaching his house, the showing up a little too early. So maybe driving around a little bit and then kind of stumbling on the front porch but So when I said I had questions, I think that the only way I can answer my questions is to now read your book, because I want to know what the hell happens. Because you build tension very, very well. So I gotta hand it to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. 3 weeks of emailing back and forth built plenty of tension within the two of us. So yeah, thank you for saying that. So Jen, I'll ask a similar question to you. What's it been like for you having your book? Our books have been out in the world about the same amount of time. What's it like for you having these really personal stories about your family building out in the world?
I think I've been surprised at how vulnerable it felt. I remember having this feeling while I was writing it, and, you know, sort of just in general conversation with memoirists, talking about how you're not doing it right if you don't feel vulnerable. And I remember thinking, like, God, maybe I'm not doing it right. Like, I don't. I mean, I put a lot of attention into my work and my craft and this and that. I'm like, but I don't feel that vulnerable about this. I feel fine. And then it was like, once it came out, I was like, oh. Oh, now
there it is.
And for me, it was this gap between, I think I was just picturing strangers whom I would never meet reading this thing I wrote, and I don't care, you know. And it was like the realization that people in your life will read this. That was jarring for me.
Mm-hmm.
Jen, I actually have a question for you. I'm so glad you read from your childbirth chapter, because that was my favorite chapter from your book. And and it's like the sensuality of it, and this being so deeply embodied, like from everything from like feeling the baby from within and then like bending down to get the mucus plug. But I guess I want to say, I barely remember any details. Like, were you actually taking notes? Were you journaling while you're in labor, or did you do it like really soon after? Or do you have really an amazing memory to be able to have those details like so available?
I didn't journal about it. I did have a really vivid memory of it, and I think I had we didn't quite get there, but in the chapter, but I had a pretty difficult childbirth. And so I know that trauma, you know, can solidify your memory in a different way. And even though I didn't journal, I do remember writing an essay that I never published really soon after that. So I think perhaps the writing, you know, maybe within a year or so helped me get, you know, encode some of the details of it.
Oh, wow.
I really, yes, your memories brought it back for me, because there were some similarities from my birth experience. Although I did not, my water didn't break. So I always kind of felt like, you know, they had to break my water for me. And I always felt like maybe I kind of missed out on something, because there was never that moment of, oh, I think my water just broke. And then you were describing it, and I was like, I think I'm okay. I think I'm all right with that. And then also sort of that weird denial. I had the same denial kind of as it was happening. Like, we're driving to the hospital, and I'm like, this is not happening today. I'm not giving birth today. I'm not going to come home with a baby. What? And then sure enough, that's exactly what happened. But so you all three of you very vividly put a person in a place. I mean, Diana, with the slammed up against the locker, with the ridges of the locker, the vents digging into your back. Wow.
I never even got to do that. That was just a fantasy. But yeah.
But it was very specific. And like, how old were you when you wrote that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I was writing about, like, I got my license when I was 17, and that felt like this sort of pivotal time of like bursting into freedom. And I think it was like just obviously like sexuality and independence and the car and like all those things. But you know, I wrote that poem when I was in my MFA program, so like in my later 20s. And I had like a few poems from that like high school era that came out. I mean, I wrote poems in high school, but I wouldn't read them to anybody. It's like the adult writing the high school poem. That's the one. But to be honest, if I went back and wrote that poem now, I would do it differently. Because it took me a while to kind of experience like, oh, that's what dissociation is when you watch yourself. And I've been reading like that's actually a very common experience for girls and women, like especially if you've been through trauma and sexual violence. But even without that, that experience of being like outside your body during even like during a sexual experience. So like how to get grounded like in the body. I don't know. I mean, it's something that I hope. I'm the mother of 2 teen daughters, and I always kind of want more for them than I had.
Yeah. Yep. Same. Yeah. Wow.
Diana, can you talk a little bit about how you chose the poems for the book, and just the ones you read were incredible. How did you make those decisions?
That's a great question. Yeah, there's 68 poems in the book. So, and I actually, when I originally had to write a book proposal for the book, it was only supposed to be 50, and I kept expanding it because it was really hard to choose. And I mean, if space and budget had allowed, like it could have been twice as long. But in some of the poems were like some of my lifelong favorites, like Mary Oliver's Wild Geese, which starts, "You do not have to be good." You probably heard it on like a poetry podcast or so like I had these kind of touchstone poems, and Maya Angelou, Phenomenal Woman, like some of these poems that I wanted to bring and like make available to teen readers who maybe hadn't encountered them. And then certain poems are also ones like that I just personally had loved for like a really long time, like decades, and like wished that maybe I had read them earlier. And then, I mean, it was, I guess for 4 years, I reviewed contemporary poetry for the San Francisco Chronicles. So I had this immersion. I mean, I was literally getting books in my mailbox every single day. So, and I still, before the pandemic, that still happened, arcs of poetry books. So I just had all this amazing poetry, like always on my desk, like all over in piles on the floor. So I just was reading, and that's where I did find a lot of poems too. And then I also, and I guess I didn't really talk about this, like I wanted to include some Instagram poets. So include poets who aren't sort of in the sort of literary world, that are fantastic, that are reaching an audience, that have this following. And so there's probably, I don't know, like 8 or 10 of those. And I had to go kind of do my own research. And that was really interesting.
Awesome.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Gathering poems, and then the illustrations are beautiful. You said it's three different illustrators.
Yeah, and actually, yeah, here's another one of my favorites. This one, if you can see it, is Sadness. There's 3 different ones. I kept giving some feedback, being like, to all the, please don't have them all be like long haired. Like, can there be some not femme presentation? Because it was important for me. There's, I think, 6 trans and non-binary poets in here, at least that. And I just, because I love their poems, and their poems are amazing, but because I wanted those voices in there for youth who are questioning their gender identity, and really for all of us to read their work. So yeah, there's 3 different illustrators. That was important too, was to have that diversity. One is a woman from England, and then there's a Latinx woman, and then like an Afro-Canadian. Like they hail from different places, and their images are just, and that was really cool to see that take shape as well.
I think it's going to be the perfect post-birthday gift for my 13-year-old. I think.
Oh, awesome.
I think it's going to be great for her, and yeah, so.
Speaking of 13-year-old, and I don't know, like Meg, if you don't want to go there, but as I'm having a teen, like how does your teen, have they read your book or like know about? Okay.
No, I had a really funny interaction with them because everything happens in the household. So the night of my book launch, I was like, I have a book launch tonight. You can go in your room with headphones, and I'll be in my room across the house using headphones. I said, because it has some sort of adult themes, which is an understatement. And they said, oh, that's okay. I'm not interested in reading your book at all anyway. I was like, okay, that's cleared up. That's just fine with me. So both of us are writers, both of their parents, and I think they're just used to it. Like that's just what my parents do. They write stuff. I don't want to hear it. They used to ask when they were littler if I was writing about them, which sometimes I was, but yeah, now they're just not interested at all. That's boring adult stuff. So
I hear that a lot from almost every author with kids. They're like, no, they're so not interested in mom or dad's books. They're like, what? No, maybe one day I'll read it when but that's funny.
Yeah, I mean, so I have two girls who are literally the demographic of this book, and they haven't read it, and they're not gonna. Yeah, I know. Like my agent was like, "I'm so excited for your girls to see the book," and I was like, "No, they saw I dedicated it to them, and they saw that." And my 13-year-old was a couple times was like, "Oh, am I going to be famous because my name's in the dedications?" Now it's poetry. I don't think so. But I think there's a healthy space for children and parents. I mean, I certainly wanted to take that as a adolescent from like the more, I don't know, I just needed to step back, and I see my kids doing that. And like right in the pandemic, like you said, Meg, like we're all here in the same house.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's true. Oh, wow. Well, the only way, the best way, I'll tell you, and I know she can't hear me because she has her headphones on in the other room. I will get the book. I will not directly give it to her from me, because if it is my idea or a suggestion that I make, then immediately not interested. So I might just kind of leave it lying around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm always curious what writers are doing next. So Diana or Jen, I know, your book is about to come out. Yours just did. What's next? What are you doing? What are you working on?
I'll let Jen take it.
I'm not totally sure. I had a novel I was working on pre-pandemic, and I was super excited about it. And then pandemic derailed everything. And I spent the summer like writing letters and journaling, and it felt so good to write for, like an audience of one. So I was super into that. And now all of a sudden, I'm interested in writing about orcas in middle age. So we're going to see what happens with that. Awesome.
Well, sounds great. Well, I thanks for asking that, Meg. I actually have, I'm still trying to find a home for my second book of poetry, which has been being sent out for like the past year. So that's many rejections, but I'm probably a third of the way, very slowly, into a collection about girls and rape culture. And I mean, it's right on topic. An excavation of female adolescence in all of its fervor and terror. So that's what I'm doing, but not really. Like right now it feels, I don't know if either you feel like it's this very external thing to be bringing a book into the world, and the kind of quiet and inwardness that I need to be immersed in poems and like a longer project. It's probably not going to be for a while that I can really dive into that. What about you? Do you have a new project?
I do. I'm working on another memoir that picks up after A Year of Mr. Lucky ends. And it's changed shape a few times, but it's a lot about grief, a lot about sexuality, similar themes as what happens in Mr. Lucky, with some different characters. So I'm excited about it. I'm hoping it doesn't take me 6 years to get into the world like this one did. So
That sounds awesome. And I love orcas. I'm gonna stay tuned for that, Jen.
mhm.
I was just looking at your chapters here, and I like that one of these chapters is called Binders Full of Men, and I think I know what that chapter is maybe referring to.
Yeah, that's probably right.
Binders Full of Men. I love it. Wow. Well, I think that brings us to the end. I appreciate all of you being here this evening. I appreciate the audience being here this evening. So thank you so much for joining us. Of course, if you click that green button, center screen that says purchase books here, you can buy all 3 books from Village Books. If you happen to not live in Bellingham and can't come to Village Books to get them, we'll ship them to you for 99 cents. And with that, ladies, do you have any final words?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Claire, for hosting us. And this was great. And I loved the chance to read with the 2 of you.
Yeah, this was really fun. This is my first reading, so thanks for online reading for this book. So I'm honored and happy to get to do it with all of you, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Yes, thanks.